Powered by Riverside FM.
Welcome to another edition, a special edition of Unconventional Playbook. Please, if you like the content, take the time to hit that like and subscribe button. This is a special day, and tomorrow is going to be even a more special day. You guys know me. My content is primarily Minnesota stuff, but I'm from Cleveland. And I follow my Browns, my Cleveland Cavaliers, and my Buckeyes. And my Buckeyes happen to be in the national championship game tomorrow against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. So I was trying to scour the country on who could I get to come on my podcast and talk a little bit about my Ohio State Buckeyes. And I know I just couldn't get anybody. I had to get somebody that know what the heck that they were talking about, that were passionate about the fan base, that kind of grew up in it. So the first person that came to mind was my guy, Mr. Rodney Young. Rodney, thank you, my brother, for taking the time to come on my podcast. There's no better person that I could have got to come on here and talk a little bit Ohio State football, looking at that game tomorrow, man. So welcome to UP Nation. Welcome to Unconventional Playbook.
My man, L Train. Hey, man, it is a pleasure to be here, man. And I'm just getting myself prepared to watch the Buckeyes and the Irish get at it, man. Thank you again for choosing me to come on here, man. It's about to be a blast, for real.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. You're doing me a favor, man. Having your brain and your analysis and just your thoughts on the game coming up is a benefit to me and a benefit to our station. So, again, thank you for coming on. When you look at the Ohio State Buckeyes, man, let's just get right into it. At the end of last year, it was a big disappointment. We had lost to Michigan, and Ryan Day was under a lot of fire. And during the offseason, we got really aggressive with the NIL stuff. We brought in a lot of parts that we needed, Will Howard, Junkins in the backfield along with Henderson. And then we had a plethora of toys at the wide receiver spot. Caleb Downs enhanced our defense. So in terms of NIL stuff, being aggressive buyers in that realm, Ohio State was it during the offseason. Then we get into the season. We start off like Ohio State usually does, winning the games that they're supposed to win, stubbed our toe against Oregon, and then we had the game versus the team up north where we really couldn't get anything going, and then Ryan Day came under a lot of fire.
Yeah.
1 month later, Rod, Ohio State is looking at a chance to win a national championship. Just give me your thoughts, man, about the season and how this thing went down and how we got to where we are right now.
So I think, it was a learning process. I do believe, the game against the team up north, I think Ryan Day played not to lose. And you could tell just by how the offensive coordinator, Chip Kelly, was calling the game. And it's not taking anything away from Michigan. Michigan, they mucked it up. They played hard. But if you look at Ohio State on paper, they shouldn't have been on the same field with them, period. So that's where Ryan Day caught the fire, is because, he hasn't beat Michigan at all.
No.
Okay, he hasn't beat them at all. The game against Oregon, the first game against Oregon, I think was a great game. Oregon stepped up. It was a really good game. So that's why I don't think Ohio State took too much flack, or Ryan Day took too much flack with that, because Oregon, it was a good football team. But that team up north, I don't think, even though they went and beat Alabama, which Alabama was down, but they really wasn't that juggernaut Michigan team with Harbaugh when Harbaugh had them. So, of course, and Ryan Day should have been under fire. There's been coaches that have lost to Michigan that lost their job. Okay, there's coaches that lost to Ohio State. Lloyd Carr lost their job because they could not beat Ohio State. However, because of this new format in terms of the tournament, it actually, I believe, catapulted Ohio State, because they still had an opportunity and have that opportunity now to win a national championship. So if you look at after they lost to Michigan, and I'm sure all the Michigan people will say, yeah, we helped y'all. Nobody cares. Okay. But because they lost to Michigan, they had an opportunity. They got it together. and they have been nothing but an absolute juggernaut since they lost to Michigan. Okay, Tennessee got bludgeoned. They had the rematch against Oregon, and they had no answers for Jeremiah Smith. And then Texas was valiant, but that defense led by Caleb Downs and Jack Sawyer and JTT, they put it to them. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing how Coach Freeman and Notre Dame kind of combat this locomotive that's called Ohio State.
Yeah, a couple of things with that, man. You're talking about beating the team that controlled the Big Ten in Oregon in the playoffs, and then you beat two SEC teams. I got a lot of SEC people in my audience that follow my program, and the SEC has always been touted as, you know, the league when it comes to Division I college football.
Right.
And for Ohio State to beat those two high-powered offenses, two well-coached teams, says a lot about Ohio State. Right. I am really intrigued, Rodney, about what happened with Ohio State. You said that the Michigan game kind of catapulted Ohio State to where they are, but something changed within the whole philosophy of the team, like the just the X's and O's part of it. And I've always wondered what happened. Was like the majority of the season Ryan Day kind of putting his thumb on Chip Kelly, and then when that Michigan game happened or that team up north game happened, Chip Kelly went to Ryan Day, said, "Hey, man, you got to let me coach. You got to let me run this thing." Because the offense, I mean, you're a former football head coach and a football aficionado. I coach basketball, but it just looks different. They're getting the ball out on the perimeter a lot more. Yeah. They're running those bubble screens, those tunnel screens. The offense just looks a little bit more aggressive, and a little bit more high-flying compared to the majority of the season. Do you see that when you watch Ohio State now?
Absolutely. And I can agree, what you just said, Coach. I think, and we have to look at the dynamics between Chip Kelly and Ryan Day. Ryan Day played for Chip Kelly. He coached for Chip Kelly. So I think, Ryan was trying to keep, because Ryan Day is a good offensive coordinator himself. That's what he was, before. But I think after, and I think he did. I think Chip was just like, hey, look, I done this before. I done this at a very high level. Let me go ahead and do it, because Ohio State just has too many weapons. It's just too many weapons. And remember, when Chip Kelly was at Oregon, he spreaded it out, and he was slinging that thing all over the place.
Oh, yeah, he made Oregon.
Yeah, so he brought that to Ohio State. Also, when you got, Junkins and JV and Henderson, Henderson back there, it's a pick your poison, okay? Yeah. Jeremiah Smith right now, and I've heard all the prognosticators say, if that kid would come out right now, he'd have been the number one pick, okay? And you watch him, that young man is just that. He is a man, okay?
Yes, sir.
And so that's why I'm curious to see how Notre Dame covers him, because you cannot cover him one-on-one. You've got to have safety help over the top, or else it's going to just look at the Oregon game. Oregon, pride comes before the fall. Oregon was like, we going to man him up. Guess what happened? And so, but yes, I do agree with you, Coach. I agree that I think Chip Kelly was just like, Ryan, I got this. I got this. Let me go ahead and do this. And if you notice, ever since they lost to Michigan, look at the numbers that they have put up in these last couple of games.
Yeah, it looks like when I watch the games, I think when Ryan Day and Chip Kelly is in the mode to throw the ball first, you always hear the analogy, you got to establish the run. Well, sometimes you have so many weapons on the outside, so many weapons on the perimeter that sometimes you can open that thing up from the running game if you start to utilize all of those perimeter weapons. So it seems to me that there are a lot of teams, even when you look at the last game that Ohio State played, defensive coordinators are trying to bait the Ohio State Buckeyes into running the ball. Not that they can't run the football, but if you pick your poison, you would probably want to have Ohio State run it rather than look vertically down the field and get all of those toys involved in the game. Right. And I think Notre Dame is probably going to come in with that same approach. not putting as many guys in the box to try to bait Ryan Day. Because Ryan Day has always been this type of coach. He wants to prove how tough Ohio State is. He wants to prove how physical Ohio State is. Do you see that sort of thing? You know, is this a game where you would try to establish, you know, all the perimeter things first when it comes to those wide receivers to try to help the running game in tomorrow night's game?
Absolutely. And the biggest thing, and you said it, you just touched on it. Ryan Day sometimes will get caught up in his own ego.
Yeah.
And if you notice, the times that he's caught up in his own ego wanting to prove something is when Ohio State is lost. Like I said, Michigan, that was an ego game. Because there was nothing that Michigan had defensively that could have stopped those weapons on the outside. You look at Oregon, okay? The defense was a little bit deficient against Oregon, okay?
Yeah.
But, yes, you're absolutely correct. When Ryan Day is in attack mode, just attack, and he's been in attack mode. Tennessee, attack. Oregon, he definitely attacked them. It was an attack mode. When he is in attack, this team is unbeatable. It's hard to beat this team. And two, this team is on a mission simply because they don't want to be the only team, number one, in all the seniors there, in 4 years, they have not beat Michigan. One of their goals was to beat Michigan, win the Big Ten, and win a national championship. Well, they were 0 for 2. They haven't beat the team up north. They did not win the Big Ten, which that could be another conversation. I think it was okay, the fact that they didn't win the Big Ten.
Yep.
But they have an opportunity to win a national championship. If they win a national championship, that loss to Michigan, honestly, means nothing. It doesn't mean a thing. And so Ryan Day has to come out with a mode of we cannot let Notre Dame breathe, period. If him and Chip Kelly and they come out aggressive and let Ryan Day sit back there and sling it. Now, one of the things you said, the reason that teams try to get Ohio State to run is because that offensive line is makeshift. They had a lot of injuries this year, and they've had to replace some people. But the more and more that they've gone along, I'm telling you, Ohio State is a train right now. They are a train. So Ryan Day's got to come out. He's got to be aggressive. He can't play not to win. He can't play passive. He can't shake up in the moment. He's got to be like Urban Meyer was. Urban Meyer was an absolute monster when it came to national championship games. And so was Jim Tressel. So
absolutely,
he's got to come out and he's got to try to bludgeon Notre Dame off the rip.
When you look at Ohio State, you know, there's been just some debate. You know, I've heard it, man, on various podcasts and national sports shows. Last year, you know, around about this time, we were talking about the deficiencies of Kyle McCord. Kyle McCord moved on to Syracuse, had a pretty good year at Syracuse. But I thought, you know, I didn't think Kyle McCord was a bad quarterback. I just didn't think he was an Ohio State quarterback. And I thought that Syracuse was a great level for him. Not a whole lot of expectations at Syracuse. Hence, he had a pretty good year. You talk about Will Howard. You know, people have been off and on the bandwagon about him. I think he's had a pretty good year. Has he had some games where he's made a few mistakes? Absolutely. But I look at that quarterback position as an upgrade from last year, and Will Howard as a quarterback where in this type of game, he's going to be able to have the opportunity to make some plays and will make some plays. What are your thoughts about Will Howard, man?
Well, I think Will Howard has done an outstanding job. Every quarterback, at whether it's junior high school, at the college level, everything is a learning process. And Will Howard had to learn how to be an Ohio State quarterback. He just came from Kansas State. Now, and Kansas State was a good program, but Will Howard didn't have the weapons at Kansas State that he has at Ohio State. Okay, where he can close his eyes and there's Jeremiah Smith on one side, there's a Emeka Egbuka, you got G. Scott going down the seam, and you can just close your eyes and pick him. So there was a lot of times where it was a learning curve. Plus, he had to learn Chip Kelly's offense. But Will Howard has done an absolutely fantastic job. I expect nothing but him to cap this, because Will Howard doesn't have to win the game because he's got too many weapons. He just doesn't. He can't lose it.
Right.
Okay, so that's the thing with Oregon. He kind of crumbled in the moment, but he got his get back when he played Oregon again. He didn't crumble, and I think this is maturing Will Howard. Even to a point where, and I know we'll get into this later. The Browns need to look at it. Okay, they need to look at him, and I don't know what it is with the Browns and Ohio State guys. They're really starting to get into Ohio State, but they could rebuild their program just by pulling a couple of Ohio State guys. But I digress.
Yeah. I hear you. I agree with that. The one thing that I like about what you said is the way Ohio State is playing right now. They are a fully loaded locomotive coming down the tracks.
Yes.
If there was any concern for me about the game tomorrow night is Coach Freeman. He's a good coach, and you can probably appreciate this, Rodney, because you're a head coach. I'm a head coach, albeit a different sport. When you have a game like Notre Dame had against Northern Illinois, I believe it was their second game of the season, a lower-level mid-major Division I team, a team that should not have beaten them.
Yeah.
But they took that loss. And for a lot of teams, that can just destroy your team confidence-wise. That can destroy your locker room. Your coaching staff may lose a little bit of credibility. You never know what goes on in the minds of young people. And for Coach Freeman to be able to gather the troops, so to speak, and galvanize his team and not lose another game since then speaks volumes about his coaching and his coaching staff. And now these guys have an opportunity to win a national championship. And so if there was anything that the Notre Dame Fighting Irish can hang their hats on tomorrow night, is their ability to have that type of resolve. That's something that Ohio State should be worried about for tomorrow's game.
Absolutely. Because when you play up against a team that has nothing to lose, listen, coaching football, you coaching basketball, when you go into a game and you got a team that has nothing to lose, it makes you step your game up because any avenue of an advantage, they're going to go. They're going to run with it. And so Coach Freeman is going to have these guys ready. Like I said, I don't think it's going to be a cakewalk for Ohio State. I could be dead wrong. They may come out and blow them out by 50. I don't know. But because I've watched Coach Freeman over the years and I've watched how he's built that Notre Dame program and I watched how he's instilled toughness in these young men, and I've watched, because he came from Ohio State, he understands how Ohio State functions. Everybody has a puncher's chance. And so don't let Notre Dame get up early, because Ohio State has shown that if a team gets up on them early, they begin to struggle. And so that's why I said Ryan Day has to come out aggressive. He's got to come foot to the gas pedal, because if Notre Dame goes up 14, we are in an absolute dogfight. And Ohio State has not bode well being in dogfights. Okay? They've been just used to bludgeoning people. And it is in sports. When, like I said, when Mike Tyson said this, he said everybody tough till they get punched in the mouth. Okay? Yeah. So if Ohio State get punched in the mouth, the question is, how will Ohio State respond? So, like I said, I'm not taking anything away from Coach Freeman and Notre Dame. Notre Dame earned the right to be in that position to play for the national championship. So I'm hoping that Ohio State, because I see ESPN and Fox Sports and all them, Ohio State is just going to run over them. I can't stand when I see that, because then you may have a level of overconfidence. And if you overconfident going in and you get punched in the mouth, your knees buckle and you don't know what to do after that. So I give Notre Dame a puncher's chance. They're going to come out and they're going to play hard.
Yeah, the athletic mind is a fickle thing. That's why I'm so into sports psychology. When you start to read your own press clippings, so to speak, and you hear everybody telling you how great you are, that affects the way you come out. That affects the way you play. And so really, really good coaching staffs really safeguard their teams
Right.
from all of that information out there. And now it's really challenging compared to when you and I grew up. You've got all the social media stuff and all of this. So it's easy to get that information, and it's harder as coaches to keep that sort of information away from their players. And then on the other side of the coin, man, you got Notre Dame that's listening to all that. And I'm sure Freeman and his coaching staff are saying, look, listen, fellas, they're saying you guys shouldn't even breathe the same air as the Buckeyes breathe. You shouldn't even be on the same field as the Buckeyes. So that's got to be galvanizing in itself. Ryan Day has made a huge comeback, obviously making a run in the playoffs. People were speculating that if he was one and done in the playoffs, that he probably would lose his job. And then you heard all the shows. What would it take for him to keep his job? If Ryan Day loses tomorrow, is he still the coach of the Ohio State Buckeyes next year?
I honestly, because he's gotten to the national championship, win, lose, or draw, I think he's still there.
Yep.
But he's there under conditions.
I know what those conditions are, Rod.
he's under conditions, and no one outside of Ohio State would know, but we know. So if Ryan Day lost, he would have a sit down with the new athletic director there, and they would let him know, you have not beaten Michigan, and you lost the national championship. Okay, you got to fix it.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, because there's no real other candidate if they were to let Ryan Day go. I mean, Freeman was an Ohio State alum. I don't think he would leave Notre Dame. Trestle's not coming through that door anytime soon.
Urban Meyer?
Well, from what I got through my Ohio State grapevine, Urban Meyer was asked if he would return, and he said no. Now, we don't know what type of talks there are behind the scenes. We don't know. But I think it would be, classless to talk to Urban Meyer now and not give Ryan Day the opportunity to right the ship, which he has. So, if he were to lose tomorrow, would it be a major disappointment? Yeah. Would the Michigan game come up large because of that? Yeah. But I don't think Ohio State would let him cut him loose because they really don't have anything to replace. Mike Vrabel just went to New England.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So I don't see it happening. But I think the pressure is on Ryan Day because to alleviate or to get rid of all the talking behind the scenes, the talking heads, he must win this national championship. So when the question is asked, who has more pressure, Ryan Day or Coach Freeman, it's Ryan Day 99%. Ryan Day has the pressure, okay? So that's why I think he will allow Chip Kelly to be Chip Kelly. However, keep an eye, because if things don't flow well on offense, Ryan Day will take it. He will take over in terms of calling plays, and you'll see the difference.
Yep.
Okay? Where Chip Kelly is slinging the ball all over the field, Ryan Day is running it.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So now, but to answer your question, Coach, no. If he were to lose tomorrow, I think he would still be Ohio State's head coach for the next year under conditions.
Yeah, I've been really critical of Kirk Herbstreit, and I've been really critical of him over the last couple of years. He does a fantastic job on College Game Day. One of the best college analysts out there. My pushback on Kirk Herbstreit was he tried to paint Ohio State fans. He tried to walk it back a little bit, Rodney, but for the most part, last couple of years he's been painting Ohio State fans with this broad brush, and he used the term lunatic fringe fan base.
Yeah.
And I would argue this. I know that with any fan base, there is, a couple of knucklehead fans out there. I don't get down with the death threats and, writing letters and emails and affecting people's families. I don't agree with that.
Right.
But Ohio State, really even any of the Ohio fan bases are pretty passionate about their teams. And I say this in coaching all the time. Sometimes pressure is good. You use the word pressure for Ryan Day. I would argue that after that Michigan loss, the pressure became so intense that it forced Ohio State and their coaching staff to make some changes. Mm-hmm. And now you see the finished product. I think the byproduct of that pressure was the winning of the games that Ohio State has had now. The fans were really upset about that game. Right. And I think Ryan Day felt that. And so it forced the coaching staff to go back to the drawing board. And now you're seeing the finished product of that. What do you think about, the Ohio State fan base? Is it over the top? I heard going into work the other morning that the national media were talking about, they talked to some Ohio State fans. And this is the way they like to paint us, Rodney. They talked to some Ohio State fans, and they said even if Ohio State won the national championship, that just because they lost to Michigan, that it wouldn't be a successful season, that Ohio State fans wouldn't look at this season as being a successful season, which is a bold-faced lie, but they're trying to make it out like the Ohio State fan base is like this lunatic fan base. What do you think about that?
Well, listen, every fan base, like you said, have their over-the-top people. I mean, I could say the Pittsburgh Steelers fan base is a lunatic fan base. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they're everybody has a fandom, but some people can take that fandom overboard. That's every fan base. Every fan base. So when Kurt Herbstreit said that, I was like, okay, that was a little bit too much. And so when it comes to that, it's like you always want to see your team be successful. To answer your question, is it a failed season, even they win the national championship by them losing to Michigan? Years ago, yes.
Yeah.
Years ago, yes, because it was a different time, a different era. I believe, and this is my opinion only, is that now that we have this playoff, that game against Michigan doesn't mean as much as it did.
It doesn't.
5 or 6 years ago. It doesn't mean anything, because if Ohio State wins that national championship, do we talk about the Michigan loss?
Nope.
No. But when Michigan won the national championship, we talked about how they beat Ohio State because that tournament was different then. So for Herbstreit to say lunatic friends, I was just like, Kurt, all right, man, come on. He's a great commentator. He's between him and Joe Klatt, they are college football.
Love them both.
Yeah,
love them both.
But when he said that, I was like, okay, Kurt, hold up. Now, don't get me wrong. My older brother is a Michigan fan, so for 20 some odd years, me and him been butting heads, and so, but I don't. It's not going overboard. He lose, you lost. We talk trash. Yeah. I lose, we talk trash. But every fan base has some people who you like. All right, slow up, back up. It ain't that serious. It's just football or it's basketball. Or I mean, you've seen it coaching basketball. You had that parent who feel like their kid is the greatest kid that walked on the court.
And they don't understand.
Yeah, and they don't understand why they kid ain't playing more minutes. And they sitting behind your bench and they letting you know that my kid should be playing more minutes, or you should be giving my kid the football. I done dealt with that, man. And so, but at the end of the day, it's because you want to see your team win and you want to support that team. Dude, I'm a Browns fan, bro. I went through an 0-16 season and still continue to watch them. Every game that they was losing, I was still watching them because that's what fandom is, Yeah. So everybody has a fandom for their team, but you have one or two, and that's every fan base that kind of goes overboard. So Kurt trying to paint out everybody, that was just a bad phrase he used.
Yeah. I embrace it because I love the Cleveland Browns fan base. I love the Ohio State fan base, Cleveland Cavaliers. I mean, growing up in Ohio, more specifically the Warrensville Heights, Cleveland area, man.
Mhm.
I have never been around such a passionate, loyal fan base as the people back in Ohio. So whenever I hear somebody attack them, I always got to come to their defense because I know how they're invested emotionally in that. You know, as a football coach, you always want to be successful in all three phases of the game, you know, offensively, defensively, special teams. If you had to hang your hat on one area where you need for the Ohio State Buckeyes to be successful tomorrow night, which one of those? Offense, defense, special teams?
All three of them are very important. But for me, for Ohio State to win the national championship, they must put points on the board.
Yeah.
They have no choice but to put points on the board. And they have the weaponry to do it. That defense is stellar. It is. That defense is stellar. But that defense means nothing if you can't put points on the board. You can't. It doesn't discount special teams, but Ohio State has to score. They have to score. That they have to get their weapons involved early, often, and quickly.
Yep, totally agree with that. Give me your prediction. I'm going to put you on the hot seat right now, Rod. Give me your prediction. What's the score tomorrow night when the bell ends?
The knee-jerk reaction, Ohio State 27, Notre Dame 14.
Okay, I'm right there with you, man. I think that first quarter is going to be a feeling out process. I think there may be a bit of nerves on both sides of the ball, so I look at the game being pretty close to start, but I just think Ohio State has too much. I don't think that Notre Dame has the quarterbacking to be able to be successful consistently against that Ohio State defense.
Right.
Again, I think it's going to be close early, but I'm right there with you. I got the score being 34-13. Ohio State Buckeyes win the national championship. I can't believe I'm saying that, man. I'm excited about this game tomorrow.
And think about it. If Ohio State wins tomorrow, they will be the only team to have won in the this playoff, and the original playoff format.
Yes.
Urban Meyer won the national championship in that original playoff format. And then Ryan Day will win in this 12-team format.
Yeah.
Just a little note for you and just show you how good Ohio State is. Also, if the Buckeyes win tomorrow, they will have beaten six of the teams that were in the tournament. Okay? Tennessee, Oregon, they beat Penn State because Penn State was in. So they will have beaten, I think, 6 of those teams. So
this is why I had you on the show, Rod. You've done your research. You just taught me something there. I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
But that's pretty impressive. You know, when I look at Ohio State, I can honestly say they've had the toughest road to the national championship. And I wanted to get your thoughts on this new format because I've heard some people bounce it around, debate it, talk about it. Oregon was the overall number 1 seed.
Right.
Their reward for being the number 1 seed was facing Ohio State their first game.
Right.
Do you think that the playoff system currently in place, do you think there needs to be some restructuring, like reseeding teams after they get into the tournament and as they progress through the brackets?
Yes, I think I think right now this is a test market, and they're going to retweak. They're going to tweak some things because if you think about it, yes, Oregon can sit up and say, "Well, wait a minute, hold up, we're the number 1 team in the country. We're the number 1 team in this bracket, and the first team we play is Ohio State, who we beat, I believe, by 2 or 3 the first time we played them. Like, come on!" But that all happened because Ohio State lost to Michigan.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's where things got, and that's why I said I'm glad that Ohio State didn't vie for the Big Ten championship because they'd have played Oregon for the Big Ten championship. So I think by them avoiding Oregon, it got them more prepared to play Oregon when it really counted.
Yeah.
So, but yes, I think this format, I like the format. I do think some things have to be tweaked because I don't know why SMU was there. There's a couple
Yeah.
teams that I was like, okay, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
We know the blue bloods are going to be there, but I think the committee is going to, after this is all said and done, because of course the Ohio State hate is going to take place if the Buckeyes win the national championship.
Oh, you
Well,
know that's going to happen.
yeah, they should have never been there. They lost to Michigan. Shut up. They're there. Okay, but I think the committee is going to look at the process and going to tweak some things. But overall, I like that these teams are vying. They're giving them an opportunity. Now, also on the backside of that, coach, they're going to have to reevaluate the Big Ten conference, winning the conference. Is that really worth it? Because right now, winning the conference, if you look at Ohio State, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether they won the conference or not. Okay, so now you got to look and see and say, well, do we really need conference championships now?
Exactly.
But I like the format. I like the fact that they're trying to think out of the box. But at the end of the day, you and I both know with college football, it's about money.
Yeah.
And so you're not going to put the little sisters of the poor in a tournament because that's not going to make you money. So you're going to see your Ohio States. You're going to see your Penn State. You're going to see your Texas. You're going to see your Tennessees. You're going to see those teams. And so I think for me, I really would like to see more of a variety of big teams. You know what I'm saying? Not just the Big Ten, but I want to see, other teams. But the format, I like the format. I just think it just needs to be tweaked a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. It was really a refreshing thing to see 12 teams get in. I think this format saved Ryan Day's job, like you touched on before. I think if he would have lost that Michigan game, Ohio State probably doesn't make a 4-team format. So now it's another non-championship year for the Buckeyes in terms of a conference championship and not being able to be in the playoffs. So I think Ryan Day probably would have been gone. This format allowed him to make a run, and right now the Buckeyes are in the national championship. So I'm definitely looking forward to the game tomorrow, man. I'm hoping – I'm pretty confident, but I'm hoping that my Buckeyes can pull that thing out. Let's flip this thing, Rod.
Yes, sir.
And talk a little bit about the Cleveland Browns. A few months ago, man, I had enough, Coach. I had enough. I posted a video. It was right after Deshaun Watson popped his Achilles tendon. And, they were showing on ESPN, Fox, all these places, that the Cleveland fans were cheering. And, there are a couple of fans out there clapping that Deshaun Watson got hurt. And never in a million years, Rodney, would I ever find any enjoyment in somebody getting hurt and have to be carted off the field. I don't care how they're playing.
Right.
I don't care, who the person is. But the media really, really came down on the Cleveland Browns fan base. And I went on my channel to try to explain the frustration of the Cleveland Browns fan base. I mean, you and I have been, fans of the Browns since we were in elementary school, man.
Right.
And there's just been a lot of disappointments throughout the years. And sometimes I think the Cleveland Brown fans, who are loyal fans, who are great fans, get a bad rap.
Right.
So I guess the first place I want to start is the whole Deshaun Watson deal, man. I have to admit, when the Browns had an opportunity to add Deshaun Watson, I was all for it. I was like, man, get Baker out of here.
Right.
And let's bring in Deshaun Watson, because in my mind, he was the Deshaun Watson of the Houston Texans.
Right.
Arguably the best quarterback in the league. And it hasn't turned out that way, but they paid him a lot of money that was guaranteed. And now they're kind of stuck with him.
Yep.
Like, what are your thoughts about Deshaun Watson? Give me your impressions on what the Browns should do with him. Which way should they go? I mean, they seem kind of stuck, Rod.
They are. They absolutely they are in cap hell right now when it comes to Deshaun Watson. When they went to go get him, I was a little apprehensive at the time when they went to go get him, because you have to, there's a guy here who hadn't played in a year and a half at the time, due to the allegations and things that went on, and we're not going to get into that, but he hadn't played legitimate football. But if you look back at the last year that Deshaun Watson played for the Texans, he had a phenomenal statistical season. They didn't win anything.
That's right.
He was throwing the ball in garbage time. Okay? So I think he threw for close to, I'm just guessing here, I think it was close to 4,000 yards, a little bit over 4,000.
Yeah.
But if you look at half of those yards, it was during garbage time. They were getting blown out the water, and he had to throw the football. So I think the Browns, they looked at his potential. Now, you also have to think the Browns wanted Deshaun Watson when he came out of Clemson.
Yeah.
And they couldn't get him. So this was an opportunity to jump on him. Okay. Now, would I have paid him $250 million guaranteed? No. I think that was a desperate move, but I think that desperation was based on Baker Mayfield's immaturity. Because when they had Baker was a decent quarterback. He was a good quarterback. He took them to their first playoff win. Okay. But Baker Mayfield couldn't shut his mouth.
Yes.
He kept talking as if he was the second coming of Tom Brady, which, by the way, if you look at the NFL commercial with Marshawn Lynch some years back, it was him and Tom Brady put all the rings in his hand. Just go back and take a look.
I remember that.
I think Baker Mayfield thought he was better than he was. Now, that does not exonerate Kevin Stefanski either, because during Baker's years, there was some boneheaded stuff that he did. There was one game, and I can't remember who the Browns played. It was Pittsburgh. They played Pittsburgh. He put a rookie right tackle in because I believe Jack Conklin got hurt. He put a rookie right tackle in, and of course, T.J. Watt absolutely ate him up.
Yeah,
and
I remember that game.
At the end of the game, Baker said, well, I don't know why we would put a rookie right tackle against an all-pro. Well, Kevin Stefanski didn't like that. What people don't know that I'm starting to see, Kevin Stefanski is really petty. And what I mean by that is, if you look at this year, he didn't want to play. He didn't like Jameis Winston. He did not like Jameis Winston at all. But if you look at the organization and how they maneuver, they really wanted, of course, if you pay $250 million to a quarterback, you really want him to succeed. But now Jason Lloyd of The Athletic came out, and you can look this article up. He talked about Deshaun Watson's deficiencies in learning Kevin Stefanski's offense. One of the Browns said that Jameis Winston learned that offense, Joe Flacco learned that offense in 30 days, where it took Deshaun Watson 2 years.
Wow.
Deshaun Watson was not a under-the-center quarterback, and Stefanski likes play action, double tight ends. That's his offense. Deshaun Watson was a shotgun guy. So, you trying to transform a shotgun guy into an under-the-center guy. And here's what lets you know that Stefanski and Deshaun Watson didn't get along. I hope you remember this game, Coach. They were playing the Washington Commanders.
Okay.
It was a fourth down. Stefanski was on the goal line. He wanted to go for it. Fourth down. Deshaun Watson seemed confused. He had to call a timeout, and it was his final timeout. You go back, you'll find that play. And that there personified the relationship between Deshaun Watson and Kevin Stefanski. Now, to get back to your original question, they are in cap hell. He is owed $90 million for the next 2 years.
Woo.
He has ruptured his Achilles, and it's guaranteed. It is his Achilles ruptured. And don't get me wrong, you never like to see a person get hurt. When I saw the play happen, my heart dropped for that young man because he was trying to come back and do something. But now you're stuck. And then come to find out, I don't know if you know this, he re-injured his Achilles.
Oh, yeah.
He re-injured his Achilles. So now he's going to be done for the next entire season pretty much. So now the Browns have got to try to decide on what kind of quarterback they want to bring in. Okay? The reason that they let Joe Flacco go is because Deshaun Watson's mental was not there. And they did not want a quarterback controversy because, of course, the city of Cleveland just loved Joe Flacco.
Yep.
Loved him. Well, Andrew Berry was like, we can't have this. We got $250 million invested in this guy, we can't have Joe Flacco here. So that's why they let Flacco go. They figured bringing in Jameis wasn't gonna hurt nobody. But then Jameis started doing what Jameis does, and now they
Yes.
like, well, we got to get rid of Jameis. Let's throw in DTR. DTR is not an NFL quarterback,
No.
not by any stretch of the means.
No.
Okay, and so to throw DTR in the game, that just lets you know the Browns were not trying to win. So, yes, I understand why the Browns went after Deshaun Watson. However, I don't think they really did their due diligence in seeing that this young man had not played significant football in almost 2 years.
Yeah, I agree with that, man. I look at that whole situation, and I don't fault the Browns at the time. It's easy. Hindsight is 2020.
Mhm.
So it's easy to beat up on the front office right now
Right.
because
Right.
the thing hasn't worked out. My deal was always with the money. Like when you invest that sort of money, Minnesota Vikings were in the same situation 6 years ago when they did that with Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins signed the first fully guaranteed contract
Yeah.
in the NFL, and he was a little bit above a mediocre quarterback, and the Minnesota
Right.
Vikings were just kind of stuck for 6 years. Now you've got a guy that's going to be making a lot of money, that's going to put a lot of pressure on your salary cap that really can't even get on the field.
Right.
So the natural question is like, what's next? You know, is it a situation where you look for your next franchise quarterback in the draft this year, being that you have the number 2 pick? Do you look at finding a bridge guy, Kirk Cousins, Sam Darnold? You know, some people speculate Aaron Rodgers. I don't know about that. And then fill some other holes because you're going to start losing some guys because of that contract. I mean, you're not going to be able to pay everybody. So
Right.
the Browns are going to be in like this 2 to 3 year limbo type stage where they've got to make smart decisions. And it's going to be intriguing when you have guys like Cam Ward out there and Shador to reach in and pluck one of those guys out of the draft. I just don't know if that's the right thing right now with where the Cleveland Browns is as an organization. What do you think?
Well, one, I don't think the Browns are going to touch Shador Sanders.
I don't think so either.
I don't think they're going to touch him. Just because of the comments that Dion has made, I don't think they're going to touch him. I don't think they're too big on Cam Ward. Don't get me wrong. If Cam Ward falls to them, they'll take him. I think that the Browns are going to either do two things. They're going to trade the number 2 pick. They're going to get extra assets. They're going to get picks. Or I believe look for Abdul Carter, the defensive end from Penn State, because Myles Garrett gave them a warning this year.
I heard it. I
Yeah.
heard it.
Everybody did. And good for Myles to do that. He gave them a warning. And so if you think about Myles Garrett, he's never had a complimentary guy on the other side that wrecked shop like he does. And I think Abdul Carter will be that pick. I think the Browns will look for a bridge quarterback. I do not, with all due respect to my Minnesota fan base, I do not want Kirk Cousins.
I don't blame
Kirk,
you.
Yeah, Kirk Cousins is a done deal. He's a done product. I know they were talking about Justin Fields. I don't think Justin Fields is going to leave Pittsburgh. I think because Russell Wilson won't be back, I think Justin Fields believes that he's going to step in Pittsburgh. So I don't know who that bridge quarterback is. I don't want Aaron Rodgers either.
What about
you know,
Sam Darnold, Rod? What about Sam Darnold?
Sam Darnold is about to get paid. And so that's why I said the Vikings got a decision to make, because the Vikings got J.J. McCarthy. That's honestly who the Browns want. They want J.J. McCarthy, but don't believe that the Vikings will give him up. But Sam Darnold is going to get paid wherever he goes because he had a really good year. The knock on Sam Darnold is they thinking, is this Cinderella? Is the slipper going to – they think the slipper came off during the playoffs.
Yeah.
So that's why I think teams are a little apprehensive on taking a flyer on Sam Darnold. So it's not a whole lot of quarterbacks, out here, but I think the Browns are going to try to find a bridge, and I think they're going to draft one. I just don't think it's the first round. I could be dead wrong. They could grab Shador. but Dion has let it be known that he didn't want him going to the Jets, and he definitely don't want him going to the Browns, And so I would, and here, when people get mad at Dion for what he said, I'm sorry, but Archie Manning did that some years back when it came to Eli.
Yep.
He said Eli's not going to San Diego. He's not playing. So before y'all start throwing Dion in effigy, this is not something that has been done before. Okay, so Dion, I get it. Would I do that as a father? No, because he knew coming out when he came out of Florida State that he was going to a bad team. He went to Atlanta.
Right.
Okay, so, but I think the Browns are going to get a bridge quarterback through free agency. I think if they do not draft either Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, don't be surprised also. Now, I said Abdul Carter, but Jalen Milroe.
Oh, yeah.
Out of Alabama. He's been talked about now because Bubba Ventrone, who is the special teams coach, is doing the Senior Bowl. He's coaching the Senior Bowl. Well, Bubba Ventrone knows Jalen Milroe and have coached him. So I think the Browns have sent him to the Senior Bowl to take a look at him. Now, is Jalen Milroe a top pick? No. But then it gives the Browns wiggle room to either do your Abdul Carter, okay? And even with that, let me give you my theory real quick.
Okay.
If I am GM of the Browns, and people may completely disagree with me, I would trade down. And once again, I told you earlier in the program, I am going to pluck players from the Buckeyes. Number one, Jack Sawyer. Jack Sawyer reminds me.
He's the dog.
Yes. Okay. So Jack Sawyer reminds me of TJ. Why? Because he's a rush. He's more of a linebacker than a defensive end, or JTT. Okay. I'm looking at now. Ibuka probably won't be in the later rounds. I think he'll be one of the first wide receivers, going. But there are some players at Ohio State, and for some reason, the Browns they just recently started drafting from the Buckeyes. But that's my thing is if I can't get Abdul Carter, and I want to get a quarterback later in the late rounds, like I said, that Will Howard's going to be there. I don't know why it is people are not dealing with Will Howard. Kyle McCord, like you said, coming out of Syracuse. I think he's a quality quarterback. The pundits here are trying to say there are not a lot of quality quarterbacks. To me, I say there's not a franchise quarterback. Cam Ward is not a franchise quarterback. Shedeur Sanders is not a franchise quarterback. They're good quarterbacks. But to change a franchise around, no. I think Shedeur is quality. He can get things. He's mobile. He can get things done. Cam Ward is mobile, but look for the Browns to entertain Jalen Milroe. And like I said, get a bridge quarterback, a veteran, and Browns fans, I'm sorry to say, but you're going to keep DTR. Don't know why, but you're going to keep Dorian Thompson-Robinson.
Well, I think Abdul Carter is the pick. I love your GM hat because I'm right in concert with you in terms of the way the Browns should approach this. Obviously, I think there's been a lot of turnover when it comes to coaches in the NFL. It's always crazy this time of year. There's a possibility up here in Vikings land that we could lose our defensive coordinator, Brian Flores, who's been absolutely tremendous
good
for
guy.
us.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. He's a dog, man. And I think when you look at the Browns, Kevin Stefanski is safe for another year. If he wasn't, he probably would have been jettisoned by now. What's your opinion on coaching change? Do you like what Kevin Stefanski has been doing with the Browns organization? Obviously, he's been coach of the year twice since he's been with Cleveland. Do you like where the Browns is at under his guidance when it comes to just the overall X's and O's of the team?
I think the one flaw with Kevin Stefanski, and I've had this conversation with many people, is what is the identity of the Browns?
Yeah.
Are they a passing team? Are they a running team? Are they a defensive squad? What is their identity? What is their identity offensively? Let's be honest. We seen with Jim Schwartz the identity of them on defense.
Yes.
We'll get into defense in a minute because that's not Jim Schwartz's fault. A lot of guys just didn't play.
Right.
But Stefanski offensively, what is their identity? Now, unfortunately, Nick Chubb, we don't know what the status of Nick Chubb is going to be. And Nick Chubb, I mean, that was a horrific knee injury. Second time he had it. Then he came back. People in Cleveland were being critical, like some of the sports talk guys were being critical of Nick Chubb when he came back. This guy came from a devastating knee injury, and y'all expected him to come back and be the Nick Chubb of old. Matter of fact, Nick was bigger than he was. So he had gained weight. So
Yeah.
Nick was trying to play himself back into shape, and then unfortunately, he broke his foot. I thought it was fortunate because I didn't think Nick Chubb should have came back and played at all. I think he should have just sat out the season and got himself ready for the upcoming season. They were already out of playoff contention.
Yep.
So there was no reason to bringing him back. I think Jerome Ford is a joke. I don't look at Jerome Ford as even a backup running back because I call him Fred Astaire or Bing Crosby because every time he gets the ball, he wants to tiptoe and dance around. Okay,
Right.
You got Deontay Foreman and did nothing with him. Pierre Strong, nothing. So you revamp that entire running back room. You just revamp it. But Kevin Stefanski doesn't have an identity. Now, I think from a X's and O's, I think he qualifies with some of the better coaches. Okay. Another issue with him is his in-game adjustments. I think
Yes.
if you look, he has a problem with in-game adjustments where teams come out differently. He doesn't know how to combat that. Where a lot of late game decisions, you sit back scratching your head like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? So I think that's why the Browns brought in Ken Dorsey, and that's why I said Kevin Stefanski is petty because he never wanted to give up play calling duties because his mindset is not the play calling, it's the players. So they forced Ken Dorsey on him. Ken Dorsey was in Buffalo and he stunk there. So what made you? I mean, he had Josh Allen and he still stunk.
Yeah.
So now you bringing him to Cleveland and expecting him to create a miracle? No. So that's why Kevin Stefanski stepped back. So now this year he's going to take back the play calling for the Browns and watch the Browns be different. Jim Schwartz is going to be Jim Schwartz. There's a lot of things that got to be addressed on the defensive side of the ball. All the concussions that Denzel Ward has been having.
Yeah.
Martin Emerson had a horrible year. But the reason I think he did was because he was exposed. Martin Emerson is a cover corner. What teams did, because the Giants put Malik Neighbors out there, he cannot handle speed. He's not a fast guy, so he can't handle speed. He can deal with the bigger receivers that may not be as fast, but if you put speed out there in front of him, then he can't handle speed. Greg Newsome, my acronym for him is BBCT. He is burnt bacon, crispy toast every time I see him come out there, whether he is in the slot or whether he is a corner. He is cooked. He is sauteed every single time. So I don't see Greg Newsome being here. I think they're gonna trade him and let him go. But to your point, to your question, Kevin Stefanski has to solidify an identity of this team offensively. Okay. I think they need a little bit more help. Jerry Jeudy had a great season. But that was based off Jameis Winston because Jameis knew how to sling the ball.
Yep.
Okay. Once you put DTR back there or Bailey Zappi or whatever other quarterback you put back there, they didn't know how to throw to Jerry Jeudy. Okay. Some will say we shouldn't let Amari Cooper go. Amari Cooper didn't want to be there anymore. So why do you want a receiver and you weren't going to pay him in free agency? Amari Cooper is going on 31 years old. You're not going to pay a 30-year-old or 31-year-old receiver a crazy amount of money. So the Browns did what they had to do. Okay. So But yeah, Kevin Stefanski has to decide what the identity of the team is. Two, I believe a lot of decisions have been made for him and he did not make. I just get that feeling. And I need Kevin Stefanski to be more demonstrative from the football side of it and say, look, no, we're not doing this. This is what we're doing. Andrew Berry, you get me the food, I'm going to cook it.
Yep.
And I think that's what's going wrong in Cleveland is that Stefanski is not cooking. People are giving him the food and telling him, here, this is what you do with it. So.
Yeah, love that insight, man. Love that insight. I think there is, we mentioned Sam Darnold. There's a possibility Sam could end up there. But like you said, man, Sam wants to get paid. I was fearful being a Minnesota Viking fan and riding with them basically. Since I moved up here, I just became a fan. That's all there was to watch up here was Minnesota Vikings football. And I was really fearful that Sam Darnold was putting the Minnesota Vikings in a situation where they were going to have to make a tough decision. Now, over his last two games, the Detroit Lions game and obviously the playoff game versus the Rams, I think he's worked himself out of a mega payday, but I do think there'll still be some suitors for Sam Darnold. I think he's a pretty decent quarterback. Do I think he's elite? Absolutely not.
Right.
Where the needle moved for me on Sam Darnold was, maybe the Vikings shouldn't let him walk because I think the whole idea was to let him walk at the end of the season, let J.J. McCarthy comes in, who I think is a fantastic quarterback, but at least the franchise tag him and then work out a trade after the franchise tag. The Minnesota Vikings have about $80 million under the cap right now, which puts them in about fourth place in terms of what teams are going to have the most salary cap money during the offseason. And this is the first time the Minnesota Vikings have ever been in that situation. You've got J.J. McCarthy, who is on a rookie deal, and you have the Minnesota Vikings, which weren't a bad team this year. Now they can take that $80 million and build off of that. So I think the Minnesota Vikings, the decision has really already been made in terms of Sam Darnold, in my opinion, that I think they're probably going to let him walk unless they can work out a deal with a team that really wants Sam Darnold, that's going to pay him over $40 million because that's where the franchise tag is set at for Sam Darnold. He's going to make about, if he signs that, $40 to $41 million. I don't think he's going to get that. But I think the Minnesota Vikings are going to have to let him walk, and I do think the Cleveland Browns will be suitors. They won't pay him a lot, but if they can work out a deal for him to be a bridge quarterback, I think that's a win for the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, and it's funny you say they won't pay him for. No, they can't pay him. They can't. They don't have that kind of money. And right now, the fan base in Cleveland are ready to go to Berea and burn it down.
Yeah,
they're ready. So the Browns' decision on who they bring in at quarterback, this is huge for this franchise. You have to be able to sell this bridge quarterback to the fan base. I do believe sometimes that Jimmy Haslam thinks that this fan base is dumb. I just believe that sometimes. But you got to be able to sell. If it's Sam Darnold, you got to be able to sell this fan base and even that locker room that Sam Darnold is going to take y'all back to where y'all were a year ago. Because let's be honest, with Flacco, even they had 5 quarterbacks with Flacco, the Browns were scoring, they were winning games, but that defense was elite. Okay? So they like, well, what happened between 1 year? I mean, Denzel Ward said that he came out a day or two ago and he said, look, we basically need a quarterback. Everything else can stay put. We need a quarterback. Now, I don't agree with everything else staying put. There's still some other issues, the offensive line, what they're going to do with DeJuan Jones. Are they keeping Jack Conklin? Ethan Posick, these guys, Wyatt Teller, you're not going to pay your 2 guards $40 or $50 million a piece. So Wyatt Teller may be gone. Okay, Joe Batonio, depending on the direction of the Browns going in, he may stay another year or he may retire. He has that ability to do so. So the Browns, the Browns have some decisions that they need to make, but they've got to sell this fan base, especially that Baker is in Tampa Bay and played well this year.
Yes,
That
sir.
really was a slap in the face of the Browns organization. Who's still in the playoffs that they cut? Kareem Hunt.
Yep.
They said Kareem Hunt couldn't run the football anymore. Well,
And he's running well.
He about to run himself right into a Super Bowl ring. That's what he about to do. So the Browns have had a history of just making knee-jerk decisions that have come back to bite them. But they've got to sell this fan base on the quarterback. So if it's Sam Darnold, they may accept that. Kirk Cousins, absolutely not. Okay? You could bring back Jacoby Brissett and this fan base won't be upset.
Right.
Okay? If you brought back Joe Flacco, they wouldn't be mad. If you kept Jameis Winston around, they wouldn't be mad. But if you bring an Aaron Rodgers in, who's just a name now,
Yeah.
no. So the Browns got a lot of work to do this offseason.
This is Unconventional Playbook. Please hit that like and subscribe button. We are on with my guy, Rodney Young, talking a little bit of Ohio State football, Cleveland Browns football. Before I let you go, Rod, I've got to sprinkle in my Cleveland Cavaliers as well. I'm not surprised that they're being really successful, but I'm surprised that they're the best team in the league and they're playing like the best team in the league. Injuries have always kind of been the bugaboo of this team. You know, they've had a solid roster for the last couple of years. Yeah, obviously last year they made the coaching change, and they see the chemistry and the cohesiveness seem to be really good with this basketball team. Barring injury, is this a championship basketball team? And I know it's early, and I know injuries come into play, but what's your gut feeling about this Cleveland Cavaliers basketball team?
So the Cavs, are they a championship contender? I believe so. Only reason I'm saying that at the way that they're constructed right now, they have an inability to beat Boston is because they are lacking legitimate wings. Don't get me wrong. I love Isaac Okoro. I mean, he before he hurt his shoulder, he was shooting 49% from the three-point line. You could not leave him open, whereas in years, teams walked away from him and said, okay, shoot it. Max Strus is a career 35, 40% shooter. You have Dean Wade, who is all of 6'10". But right now, if you look at the Oklahoma City game where they got blown out, and for my fans of Oklahoma City that hit my inbox talking about how great OKC is, they're a good basketball team. But if you look at the brass scheme of things, Cavs beat them at home, and then you beat us at home. You did what you had to do. So don't go any further than that. But Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is an MVP candidate. I will say that. But they got to be able to combat the bigger wings, the Jason Tatums, the Jaylen Browns, and I don't think they have that. Dean Wade, they want it to be. So I heard yesterday that the Cavs are investigating possibly getting Cam Johnson from Brooklyn. I love Cam Johnson, but who are you going to give up? Karis LeVert is vying for Sixth Man of the Year. Do you let him go? But the Cavs got some decisions to make. But they are Kenny Atkinson. I equate Kenny Atkinson, and it's not saying that this is who he is. If you remember, and you're a big basketball fan, Doug Collins coached the Bulls with Michael Jordan and a young Scottie Pippen and those guys. And
don't forget about Brad Sellers. Don't forget about Brad Sellers.
The mayor of Warrensville, no doubt. And he coached them where they began to win, but he couldn't get them over the hump against the Pistons. Well, that's when Phil Jackson came in and Tex Winter came in. And that's when you started seeing the championship pedigree. Of course, Michael Jordan matured, but you started to see the championship pedigree. This is what happened in Cleveland. No disrespect to J.B. Bickerstaff. He took because the Cavs were terrible when he came in. He took them and he rebuilt them, but he couldn't get them over the hump. Well, Kenny Atkinson has now unlocked what the Cavs truly are. These dudes move the ball. They move bodies. These guys can shoot. They can go inside. and he has unlocked Evan Mobley. If he truly has unlocked Evan Mobley, then I don't believe that they need to trade, because they have an asset in their G League that if he can develop him during the regular season, that he could be the answer at that wing, and that's Imani Bates. Imani Bates is a walking bucket. This kid can shoot in the dark with his eyes closed. His deficiency is defensively. So that's where the development has to come. Imani Bates is a 20-plus point scorer.
Yep.
Okay, which equating to the NBA game, he's about 15 to 17 a game. Okay? So he has that. And I believe instead of tearing your roster up, don't get me wrong, I want Cam Johnson. If we can get Cam Johnson and keep this core intact, fine. Because people are talking about, oh, well, I love the Cavs chemistry. Good. Chemistry is good. But chemistry ain't going to win you an NBA championship.
Right.
Bodies and guys that can do some things. So, no, I love what the Cavs are doing. They are the top team in the Eastern Conference. Boston is struggling. But as you understand, Coach, it ain't always about the regular season. Let's just get to the playoffs. Yep. Because behind them, the Knicks are playing good basketball. Karl Anthony Towns has now found his niche there. Don't be shocked at Paolo Banchero and that Orlando Magic ball club.
They were tough last year for the Cavs.
Them dudes is playing ball. Okay, so, Giannis and Dame are figuring it out. They're coming. So, but the Cavs, I'll put the Cavs up against any team in the league, and they will compete. Donovan Mitchell has done what a superstar generally doesn't do. He stepped back. He's allowed Darius Garland. He's allowed Jared Allen. He's allowed Evan Mobley. He's allowed those guys to get theirs. And so when you got a core group that can get theirs like that, they're hard to beat. But I think they are a legitimate wing away from winning a championship.
Can't disagree with you on that at all. The one thing I like about the Cleveland Cavaliers basketball team is that they are built. What used to be traditional is a non-traditional basketball team. They're playing with two bigs, and their one big, Evan Mobley, has the ability to play inside, but he also has the ability to step outside on the perimeter and be able to do some things as well. So I think it makes the Cleveland Cavaliers a very unique team and a tough team to stop. I thought that's where the Minnesota Timberwolves last year made a splash, and they were so hard to get out because they had two traditional bigs, and Karl Anthony Towns, who's with the New York Knicks playing the 5 spot, he was our stretch 4 last year. Yeah. So when you build your team like that where everybody is 4 round 1 and shooting threes, and now you got the Cleveland Cavaliers, the way they are structured right now, they're just a tough out. I look for them to make, probably for the first time in a long time, a pretty decent run in the playoffs, if not get to the finals, because I think they're going to be a tough out. I think the one concern for me is their backcourt is a little small. You mentioned the wings in terms of being able to defend. I like the young man from the G League. I am totally in step with you when it comes to him. I don't think the Cleveland Cavaliers should really do anything with their roster. Right. I hope it's not a situation where they feel kind of pressured to make a trade when they really don't need to make a trade. They just got to go all in on this roster and develop this roster. I think the Cleveland Cavaliers are going to be okay. Are the Boston Celtics daunting? Absolutely. Milwaukee Bucks are starting to figure it out, but I don't think they have that depth. I think coming in, the Philadelphia 76ers, everybody thought they were going to be a threat to the Boston Celtics and be in the conversation of things. I really don't see that. So I think it's the Cavaliers and the Boston Celtics right now. If things stay structured the way it is and barring any catastrophic or major injury, knock on wood, I think the Cleveland Cavaliers are definitely going to be there. I think we have an upgrade in coaching.
Yes.
I like what you said about J.B. Bickerstaff. He took our organization out of the mud, but we just needed something else. He couldn't get them over the hump. And so now I think we've got to upgrade in coaching, and I think that's going to bode well for the Cleveland Cavaliers going down the stretch
And
of this season and getting into the playoffs.
look at JB. Now, no disrespect, but look at what JB's doing in Detroit.
Yeah.
Detroit's winning ball games. He unlocked Cade Cunningham. So it's not disrespectful to JB, but they needed more of an offensive lift that Kenny Atkinson gave. I'm gonna get this to my hardcore Cavs fans.
Okay.
This team reminds me of the Brad Daugherty, Larry Nance, Mark Price,
Craig Elo,
Steve Kerr, Craig Elo, with a sprinkle of Ron Harper, Hot Rod Williams.
Hot Rod Williams.
Yeah, they because with Lenny Wilkins, Lenny had them moving the ball. All of those guys could pass the ball. Okay, when I look at Jared Allen, he reminds me of Larry Nance because if you come in there wrong, your stuff is gonna get pinned to the backboard. Okay. Evan Mobley reminded me of Brad Daugherty because Brad Daugherty, even though Evan Mobley's an outside shooter, he can still post up and give it to you. You know what I mean? So just watching the Cavs move the ball around is beautiful. And Darius Garland is playing at an all-star level. Now the question, let me ask you this question, Coach.
Okay.
You're asking me a question. Let me ask you one. Should the Cavaliers have 4 all-stars in the game?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think that's tough. I think that's tough PR for the NBA. I think whenever those situations, they're faced with those situations, the NBA has a history of going the opposite way with that. But absolutely, they should have 4 all-stars.
Okay, now you realize the last group that had 4 all-stars was the Atlanta Hawks.
Yep.
Okay, so it's very rare that you have 4 all-stars. We know Donovan Mitchell's going to be there. Donovan Mitchell's that guy. I think it should be Donovan, Darius, and Evan. I don't think Jared is going to make it, even though Jared Allen has been a linchpin to this team. I don't think he's going to make the All-Star game. My concern with Jared Allen is when he gets into the playoffs because he got absolutely bullied last season by Isaiah Hartenstein.
Yeah.
Okay? And Jared Allen is a nice guy. They're all nice guys. But you and I have seen in the playoffs, you got to be nasty.
Got to be nasty, man.
Yeah, and I need, I see Evan Mobley trying it. I need Jared Allen just to become absolutely nasty during the playoffs. They can make a run. I see the Cavs and Boston in the Eastern Conference Finals. And so that's why, for me, home court advantage is going to be key for the Cavs. They got to keep winning because playing Boston with the home court advantage, I think if they really put it together, they can pull it out. And I don't think they need to make a trade. But would I be upset if Cam Johnson showed up? No, I wouldn't be upset. I would be upset if you got rid of Max Strus or if you got rid of Karis LeVert or Georges Niang. Because they flow well together. So, I see the Cavs doing some things. Like I said, they played the T-Wolves last night. Got a chance to watch.
Took it to my T-Wolves, man. They took it to my T-Wolves.
But the T-Wolves, like I said, Anthony Edwards in the NBA as a whole is a problem.
Yeah.
Okay. This guy can. I think I heard Rasheed. It was either Rasheed Wallace or it was Kevin Garnett said that he reminds him of an '84 Jordan. He can hit some shots, but he will put you in the basket. Okay. Yeah. He's probably one of the more skilled players that I've seen. So, but when you play against the Cavaliers, ball movement, man movement, kind of like that European kind of game that they're playing, and then you have all these shooters out here, and they didn't have Evan Mobley last night.
Right.
Which I was like, wow. Evan Mobley and Isaac Okoro both sat out last night. Yeah, they are. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. It's still we're almost at the halfway mark of the season. We'll see, because after the All-Star game, that's when everything go downhill. And now you get some real basketball being played.
Yeah. It's an exciting season, man, for Ohio State fans, and obviously the start of the Cleveland Cavaliers. My brother and I are up here. We still follow Cleveland sports, Ohio sports, really ingrained. My dad was a big-time Ohio guy, and so we used to go to all the games. So, the fan base of Cleveland and Ohio State still runs through my blood. Really passionate about all those franchise. Rod, man, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. You're doing me a big favor just coming on this show and giving UP Nation your insight on just the Ohio State Buckeyes and the Cleveland Cavaliers and what's going on with the Cleveland Browns. I would like to have you on after the national championship game, again, just to give your analysis if you have the time. So I'll be reaching out to see if we can do that, just to do a follow-up, man. But this has been a lot of fun, and this has been great, man. This show has been fire. I really appreciate your time.
Coach, I always got time for you. I make time, man. I appreciate it. UP Nation, appreciate y'all, man. Keep supporting my man here. This is a great guy. Like I said, I've known him for years, man, and this is a real good dude, really good platform. Love it. I would love to come back.
I appreciate that, man. I appreciate that. UP Nation, let's thank Rodney Young for taking the time to come on the show. And so we will definitely be reaching out. Ohio State Buckeye fans, man, let's go. Let's support this team. Tomorrow night, it's an exciting time. I will be in front of my television watching the show. And, again, we'll have Rod back on to do some analysis and see what he thought of the game. Hopefully, it's a Buckeye win. UP Nation, we will make sure to see you when we see you. Latrey, take us home, man.
I don't know who I am. Can I say I'm a man? Am I losing my mind? Am I wasting my time? Do I know who I am?